everybody, and welcome to the Maurice Brown Show. We have a special guest today who has appeared, a comedian who has appeared on CBS, A&E, Showtime, Comedy Central, and Comcast, and has headlined over 100 comedy clubs throughout the United States and the Caribbean, and has his own dry bar comedy special. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the show the very funny and the very talented Mark Klein. Hello, Mark. How are you?
Greetings, Earth humans. What a privilege, pleasure, honor, and a thrill to appear among you as a living man through the miracle of digital communications.
Man, you have got to love this age, especially for guys our age, as it were, because, dude, we don't know what we're doing. We're trying to figure out how to swim and navigate through this new world. But we're doing it, Mark. We're doing it, man.
Well, I live my life live and in person, not digitally. So I navigate these waters, but it is a rare thing for me to actually drop anchor in them.
No doubt about it, man. I tell you, we're living in a COVID-19 world pandemic. And for comics and actors and entertainers, it's really difficult, especially for comics. How are you dealing with this period of time as a comedian, Mark?
Well, I have some online business as well. I'm on Sirius Satellite. They play me. I have some clients who did some Zoom shows with me. So it's been fine. I've had time at home with my wife that I never had before, and my son and my family. And I have to tell you the truth, Mr. Brown, I don't have any complaints. I got my health, my family's good, and my dog still likes me after a year with me. So I ask no more than that.
Well, you can't beat it. If your dog still likes you, you're A-okay.
Done. Correct.
Well, so I take it you have not been doing any shows on Zoom or outdoor shows, nothing like that?
I've done about 6 Zoom shows,
Okay.
and I've had about a dozen outdoor shows. And then I've had indoor shows that have been distanced and spaced out, 6, 8, 10 feet between tables. My business, I tell my people, my business is crawling back. It's not flying back, but it is coming back. And I would expect before the year gets away for 2021 to see about half of my business come back that left. And also, to tell you the truth, at my age, if 75% of it comes back and no more, I'm happy with that. That doesn't break my heart.
There you go. I totally agree with that. I mean, what's your opinion of doing comedy on the virtual platform?
It's not comedy as I grew up doing it. There's a way to do it. If you're not technical, which I am not, you have to make allowances for, the half-second delay between it getting out there and it coming back to you, especially a Zoom show where you have to tell the host, I need 10 people laughing and the rest muted so I have an audience. It's a live audience, but not live audience. You understand, of course, being a comic, that in the presenting venue, you almost want to touch them. Their laughter is palpable to you as a performer. You can feel the resonance of their laughter. And to even get great laughs on a Zoom show, but not have that tangible vibration in the air of people laughing, you are missing something. And it's not the same experience. Does it make it better? Does it make it worse? It's just different.
It is. I would totally agree with it. It's a different kind of rhythm that you have to figure out, and it's not live. I mean, and it's nothing against Zoom. I actually think, Mark, this is probably whenever we get back to normal, and I'd love to hear your opinion of this, but my personal feeling is this platform is going to go into the norm.
I won't disagree with that at all. I think this COVID has done a lot of people a favor in ways they have no way of knowing about yet. It's forced people to connect out of their normal comfort zone into people who are doing things. You and I, we'd never have connected were it not for the situation we were in. So multiply that times 1 billion, and you've got people connecting in ways they never did before. And in that regard, it's going to be very, very different for a lot of us. Depending on hi, Fossil. Good to see you. I see you on Facebook, and now I get to see you on my phone as well. I think depending on what your particular comic niche is, and every good comedian has their own, is where you're going to land. For example, I'm in my 60s. I'm not a kid anymore. So I'm not in clubs anymore. My main land clients are 55 plus communities and resorts. So, and those people are coming back first because it's a controlled environment. It's a private show and they control everything about it. These aren't shows open to the public. So that
Yeah.
business has come back for me faster than the nightclub business would have come back had I simply remained in that.
Wow. Yeah. I think that's a great way to describe it. I mean, when you get to our age, I'm a little bit younger than you, but not by a ton. I understand. We don't need a whole lot of bells and whistles. We just need an audience that pretty much gets it, where we're coming from, the pair of glasses that we're peering out of. I mean, that's probably the only thing that matters to us. But I mean, the younger crowds are challenging, but I like what you said. I mean, we're really not that worried about things in general. Outdoor shows are kind of difficult though, because you got the laughter goes straight up into the air, and everybody's spread out, and that's. I mean, what's your opinion of outdoors?
The last outdoor show I did was in Florida, in Southwest Florida. It was a 7:30 start time after dark. I was brightly lit with spotlights, and every gnat in Southwestern Florida came to the show, sat in the front row, and about a dozen of them went down my throat for dinner. It is probably my least favorite way to perform live, but it's what your clients want. It's what they get. I got to write a joke about it. I said, I had a client wanted to do an outdoor show. I said, fine, use the parking lot, spread out as much as you want. 150 people there. Everybody was happy. The people at Walmart weren't too happy about it, but that wasn't my problem.
No, not at all.
So it's a strange, it's pioneer country for us. And
Yeah,
as you learn,
yeah.
as you adapt to some of these and learn to do shows in these different venues, it's a good comic experience, even if it's not the ideal comic experience.
What is it like on cruise ships? I mean, it's like, is that a more challenging? The audiences on cruises, are they more challenging, easier to kind of maybe, drive around, move around? I mean, what's it like versus clubs?
When I started working cruise ships, I had the same concern that this is going to be different. As it
Yeah,
turns out, my target audience, the people for whom I have a comic voice, are on cruise ships. They
got
tend
it.
to be a little older. They're seated in a non-nightclub venue where they're going to listen to everything I say, and I'm not
Mm.
competing with the drink mixer or people coming and going during the show. I love working cruise ships, and I was doing about 15 to 16 weeks a year on ships for all kinds of cruise lines. Norwegian was my main client, also shows for Oceania, Region 7 Seas, Holland America, clients like that. And I enjoyed it tremendously. You have to be flexible in your comic approach. People in a cruise ship audience don't want to hear about your politics. They don't want to hear about your dysfunctional family experience. They don't want to hear anything negative. They're on vacation. They're there to have fun. So they don't need your social consciousness lecture as part of their experience. In fact, I
Okay.
have cruise ship contracts that say no politics on stage or off stage. And if that's a problem, then that shouldn't be work that you take. But
Yeah.
that being said, when I'm in front of a cruise ship audience, I know that in that audience is a business card that's a land gig for me if I do that show correctly. So I
Yes.
like to think that every cruise that I'm on is going to lead to 4 or 5 gigs on land in the country clubs, resorts, and private events that I do when I do land shows. So they're not only paydays for me, but they're opportunities.
Well, you said your target audience is more or less on the cruise ships. I got to ask you this, and you mentioned, like I said, we're about the same age. What are the perks, Mark, of being old?
I love being the old crusty guy in the neighborhood. I've waited all my life to say things old guys say. Hey, you kids, get
Yes.
off my lawn. In fact, when there are no kids on my lawn, I rent kids, put them on the lawn, and tell them to get off. I love this
Yes.
stuff.
Yes.
Um, the only perks of getting older are the ones that you establish for yourself when you're younger.
Okay.
Let me say, Mr. Brown, that if you've been lucky enough to meet the right person to spend your life with, if you've been well directed enough to raise your children the right way that they actually want to talk to you at night, if you've established for yourself a home life that's not dependent for its affirmation on a stranger laughing at you in a bar somewhere, then there's no problem with getting older because you're aging into the life that you built for yourself. And
Yes.
you call it luck, call it work, call it fortune, call it the grace of God, however you want to describe it. I'm in a place that I tried to build for myself for many years, and I'm very happy in that place. And I don't get to the end of my career thinking that show business owes me anything. It does not. Every good thing I have in my life that didn't come from my religion and my mom and my dad has come to me as a result of being a comedian. So
Yes.
it owes me nothing.
Well, I totally agree with you. I mean, my wife writes half my material. She's all in. She's she's funnier. She's all in. She just don't want to get up there on stage, but she's hilarious. But she's just to kind of echo your point about family being all in with what you're doing. I mean, that's really the key. You know, as long as you have a support base at home, man, you can't beat this. The only thing that I learned was I needed to listen to my body over my mind. I was at a church volleyball picnic. I had a chance to spike the ball, and my mind said, "Go get that ball. You are the man." And my body said, "Whoa, wait a second. If you go up there and do that, you're leaving here on a stretcher." And I left there on a stretcher.
You know, I'm a horse racing guy. My athletic passion in life is thoroughbred horse racing. And
Okay.
I got letting the horses do the running instead of me.
So that's a better way to go with it, Mark.
I think it is. I try to stay in shape as best I can. I run about 2.5 to 3.5 miles every day.
Oh, wow. Nice.
These aren't 9-minute miles. They're 10-minute miles and 11-minute miles, but I still try to jog them out. And I've always tried to maintain a life outside of comedy that was satisfying to me, should my life in comedy not turn into a life in comedy. As it turns out, I made my living for 40 years doing this. And while I did give up time at home, I missed a few birthdays, more than I would have liked to. And I wasn't at home as much as I maybe wanted to be or should have been. But it's also allowed me to take my family to places around the world that I never, ever could have taken them otherwise. So it's been a fair trade-off for me. Again, I don't feel like it owes me anything.
Amen. I hear that, Mark. Great words, man. Great words. You were talking about, you know, the fact that, you know, you're dealing with strangers in the clubs. You come home. Home is home. You got to love that. But I've got to ask you this. What motivates you as a comedian to go into, or just as a human being who turns into a comedian, what motivates you to go into a room full of strangers and make them laugh, Mark?
When I was a kid, and I mean 6, 7 years old, I'd be watching the Ed Sullivan Show on Sunday night, and one of those old school comics would come on. Jackie Leonard, Jack Carter, people like that. And when I saw them at 6 and 7 years old, I remember thinking to myself, that's the guy I want to be. That's who I want to be. I want to be that guy.
Yes.
You talk and people laugh. And I started my career a long time ago when there weren't many venues to get started in. There was no comedy club circuit around the country when I got started. I did most of my early shows in places like strip joints and fraternity parties, any place that would put me on stage with a light and a microphone.
Yes.
And when comedy clubs opened up, so you could work them and make a living on a comedy club circuit, I really thought I'd gone to heaven. I thought this is you are doing what you are meant to do. And the biggest challenge of my career over time has been translating that to an adult's life instead of a teenager's life. To I'm doing what I am meant to do, but I'm doing it in front of people in different venues. Again, I work a lot of resorts, country clubs, 55 plus communities. That's my audience now. My audience isn't 24-year-old kids with buckets of beer in front of them. When it was, I had a great time, thrilled to do it, and give me 50 weeks a year, give me all you got. As your life evolves, your comedy should evolve, and the people in front of whom you make your living will tend to evolve as well. And if you have a good combination of good fortune, good planning, and an idea of where you want to be years down the road instead of days down the road, you can build that the way you want it to look. And for the most part, that's how it's worked out for me.
Well, you know, comedy is really kind of a miracle, because when you go into these places, and you know, no matter the age demographic, it is a room full of strangers by and large. And let's be honest, Mark, you've been up there a bunch of times. When you're standing up there and you're looking at the audience, and if we're just being honest with ourselves, there's some people out there I would talk to in front of a Walmart. I just wouldn't. But but you know, for the next 40 minutes or however long you're going to be there, your goal is to make that person your best buddy. That's your goal.
It's total attitude. It's every time you're holding a microphone, this is a home game for you, not an away game for you. That's
Right.
the feeling. That's
Yes.
this is where I do what I do. And to convince your audience, trust me with your time. What your audience is giving you is the most precious resource any of us have, and that's your time. You don't get any of it back. You have to make the most of it. And you've
Yeah.
got, as you know, from a stand-up background, you have about 60 seconds to convince them I am worth your time. And
Exactly,
where
Mark.
there will be some people in the audience who, by reasons of drink or lack of social training, won't ever understand that. 99% of them do. And
Yes.
I like to think that the show that I do has enough meat to it in terms of laughter and intellect and thoughts and ideas that it is worth your time.
I was going to ask you this question a little bit later on in the interview, but you said something that makes me want to ask it now. And it's like 99% of the people in the audience are good people. They came to have a good time. But that 1% lacking the social training, they usually end up manifesting into hecklers sometimes. Anyway, how do you deal with hecklers, Mark?
Well, you're not going to make people smarter. You're not going to teach them manners while you're up there. You're going to
Yeah.
have to deal with what's been dealt to you.
Yes.
And I tend to work very fast. Anyone who's seen my show, I work very quickly on stage. There's not a lot of room for you to go shouting stuff out.
Right.
And if I
Right.
start to hear it, I just get faster and louder until we
Yeah.
get to the punchlines, and the laughter will take over from there. The
Yes.
very few times I've
I
had
like
to
that.
actually pick people out and address them, I try to kill them with kindness. I mean, I will stop the show and say, "Excuse me," out of respect and kindness to the people around you, if you'd be so very kind as to lower your voice to the point where it's not distracting
Yes.
me or our fellow audience members, or the large gentleman in back who's slapping a wrench into the palm of his hand right now.
Yeah.
You'll just try to do it in a way that's so disarming.
Yeah.
They follow along, and sometimes it works. And if it doesn't, you've done what you can do. I made myself a promise years ago, and I've held to this. After coming down pretty hard on a heckler in a way that wasn't very attractive,
Okay.
I promised myself I will never let someone in the audience turn me into someone I don't want to be.
I love it. Great, great, great point. And that's what you're fighting against when you're up there, because I mean, Mark, you're a good guy, and I try to be a good guy as well. I don't like attacking a heckler, and it hasn't happened very often, but the off chance that it occurs, I take the same road. I just say something to appease them, give them their 15 seconds of fame, because a lot of times they just want to be recognized, and they're not really trying to disrupt you. They're just excited. They'll sit down, and go, oh yeah, that's a great point, but there's more. You're gonna love the rest of this. I'll say whatever, just to keep them kind of a piece. They'll sit down. But there's always that one that's had too much to drink, and no matter what you do, it's just fruitless. It's just fruitless.
It's an awful experience, but every comic goes through it. I cut my teeth in strip joints. And
Okay.
believe me, when you start your comedy career telling jokes to people in a strip joint, you get pretty bulletproof. You end up with
I can only imagine. Yes.
in both the literal and figurative sense of that term. And you end up with a Rolodex of things to say to hecklers, and of course, none of them are very kind. And I'm not ever going to be that guy again, but when I had to be that guy, I was. And it's never a good feeling. Some comics, I know comics that they like it. They don't
They
mind
do. There are
encouraging.
some that love it. Yeah.
That was never me, and that's its own way of handling people and dealing with people. It's not something I've ever really position I wanted to be in. But I've also learned a lot of nonverbal communication skills that help when you're on stage, that you're telling people to be quiet without them even knowing it. The use
Yeah.
of a hand, you stretch your hand out and you put it on someone towards them without even talking to them. They know when they see the palm of your hand, that means please be quiet or shut
Yes.
up, however you want to say it. And that works.
Yeah.
That's got about a 50% success rate.
Yes.
So while I'm doing my show to the people, stage far and left, I've got my hand stretched out, palm out towards someone who's close and to my right. And that 90%, a great percentage of time, that will get them quiet. And then after they get quiet, I will look them in the eye as a reward for getting quiet. and I haven't interrupted my routine. I mean, I'm still doing my comedy, but I'll put the hand out. Once they get quiet, I'll give them eye contact and nod to them as I do the rest of my bit. And that's kind of a reward for, please, thank you. Now we go on with the show, but you haven't had to actually say any of that. You've done it just using nonverbal communication skills. And you either learn those from someone who can teach them to you, or you'll accidentally stumble on a number of those on your own.
Yes, yes. I actually think that's a skill set that you can learn.
Very much so.
As
And
far as how
that's
to
one area
handle
we're doing.
someone,
That's one area we're doing comedy
like
workshops
that.
in a bigger city that has a regular ongoing set of comedy workshops where you're studying, kind of mentoring under someone who's been around and knows these little tricks of the trade and can teach you. You don't just look at the spotlight unless you're doing a TV set. You don't just look at the three people in the front row. You sure don't put your head down and look at your shoes. You pick out 5 different sets of points in an audience and make that W at random points going back and forth until everyone in the room thinks you've spoken directly to them. These are the things that a starting comic needs to have someone who's done this a couple hundred times actually tell them, here's how you do that if this is how you want to look. And then if you're going to be a TV act, you need someone who understands how to make your show come out the other end of a camera and can teach you those skills. That's a whole different set of skills.
Okay.
And whereas you see these guys who get on TV with a great 6 to 8 minute set, well, that's not accidental. They didn't fall out of the sky knowing how to do that. They had direction, they had experience and expertise, someone who told them, here's how you work a television camera in front of an audience or in front of no audience. And that's a whole different set of comic skills. It's not one, as a matter of fact, that I'm particularly adept at. That's not a comedy skill that I have ever really nurtured because I've never been a TV act per se. I'm a live audience performer.
Gotcha,
So
yeah.
if I ever moved to Los Angeles or New York and wanted to get on TV a lot, I would certainly take the acting and camera work training it required to be a professional on camera. Because if that's who you're going to be, no matter how funny you are, it has to come out the other end of the camera onto a screen. And that's its own separate skill set.
Now, I saw you on a Dry Bar Comedy Special. That's how I came across you, Mark. I thought was very, very funny, hilarious, clean, and very, very methodical. Like, I mean, as a fellow comedian, I love watching guys that are highly skilled, and you are. And I've heard nothing but great things about how Dry Bar Comedy out in Provo, Utah, how they handle the comedians, how they receive them, and what was it like being out there in Provo?
Top to bottom, first class operation. Top to bottom. They didn't give you green M&Ms in your hotel room an hour before the show. None of that diva stuff. But they treated you as you would want to be treated, as you would treat someone else. And from when you got there to when they taped you, there were no surprises. There were no mysteries. They told you what was going to happen. It happened. Everything from did you get your check on time to were the technicals right, make everything. I'm just saying top to bottom, first class experience all the way. And they mastered the art of putting any type of performer who can conform to their standards of language, behavior, and content. And this isn't censorship. Nobody puts a gun to your head. This is a choice you make. I will go do a Dry Bar special. They will put people in front of you who respond to comedy when it's well done in exactly the way you'd want to hear it come back at you. And again, I was in front of a much younger audience than I am in Utah. I mean, I'm a conservative Jew from Kentucky, and I'm in front of mostly Mormons in Utah. So as odd as that marriage sounds, they were the most delightful audience, and I was treated, give me that every day, all you got. It was a delightful experience.
And it was a great performance. I'm hoping to get an opportunity to do a special out there as well. And the audiences, I heard, like you said, they come to have a good time. As long as you are tasteful and your comedy is good, it will be recognized as such by those audiences. So that is really cool stuff, man. I tell you, Mark, also, when you're doing this, I know this didn't happen out in Provo, but there are times like you run into a heckler from time to time. It's not always hunky-dory, good times on stage. Sometimes you don't do so well, i.e. bombing. What is your worst bomb experience, Mark?
Oh gosh, I could tell so many stories on myself. Let's see. I did a show, and this was my fault. This
Yeah.
was not it's not, wasn't a bad audience. I took a gig for accountants, a breakfast show at 8 o'clock in the morning.
Oh my goodness.
And
Wow.
Mr. Brown, this was many years ago, and I did not have the right show for them, and I had not prepared the correct show for them. I just went up and did my act.
Yeah.
Well, I learned when you do corporate events, you prepare a show for your client. You just don't go do your act. Even
Yeah.
though it sounds like you're just doing your show, you're doing a show that's been prepared specifically for them. You find out who's going to be there, their male to female ratio, their professional level of expertise in the field, what they do for all that background stuff. And I hadn't done any of that, and it
Yeah.
went just as badly as you think it would. Another mistake I made, and this was my fault. I did a show for the meat department of Kroger's grocery stores,
Okay.
national meeting. So this is every
Yes.
butcher at Kroger's at their national meeting. And I had a bit in my act about Walmart and Sam's Club.
Okay.
And had not done my research. I did not realize that the grocery department at Sam's Club is one of Kroger's huge competitors. And as soon as they heard the phrase Sam's Club, they went blank on me.
Wow.
And I never
Wow.
did get them back. And that was just lack of research and preparation on my part. In terms of the worst bombing experience on stage, I had some shows in strip joints where 75% of the audience were Hispanic roofers. I mean, just you're up there tap dancing away and trying to do your act, and they want to see naked women, not hear your thoughts on thermonuclear dynamics.
Yeah.
So every now and again it happens. I never had the typical bombing shows, second show Friday. You always hear second show Fridays every nightclub comedian's worst nightmare. When I was doing my nightclub act exclusively to make my living, I had an X-rated show. Not at all what I do now. It was a much
Hmm.
bluer show. And
Yeah.
second show Friday night was my sweet spot. Give me all those late shows you got, because I had the act for them. I had prepared an act that was perfect for them.
Yeah.
So most of our bombing, looking back, most of the times we bomb are lack of preparation or understanding of who we're actually in front of, rather than they were just a bad audience that night, or I was off my game. I will also say this. I've never gone on stage where I've had too much to drink, or been out in my car in the parking lot enjoying some smoking vegetable matter. I've never gone on stage, when I was out of my mind with some altering
Yeah.
substance. And that was the reason I bombed. That I was never that guy.
Well, I like what you said about you're talking about a situation that, like, okay, that was my fault. I deserve that. No question. When usually when it happens, you're able to look back and go, yeah, that's my fault. I shouldn't have told this particular joke, or I shouldn't have done this or done that, or what have you. It's always something you as the performer did. It's never the audience's fault. That's, I think, the best way for a comedian to look at it, because you got to do your homework, like you said, and you've got to make sure you're on your game, and you want to say certain things a certain way, the way that you want to say it, or whatever. And if you check off all of those boxes, you're usually going to do pretty well. Not that that's a guarantee, because that's still that element out there where things could go bad. But I think when it gets to the point, Mark, where it's like, oh no, I can't get them back. Like, no matter what you try, it's just like nothing. It's just over. It's just over. And I've had a self-induced experience like that, and it's like, it wasn't the audience's fault. It was like I misread, and I just should have known better than to pitch that one. It can happen.
Well, a comic that's been doing this for 6 months is not going to have 6 different sets in his back pocket that he can rely upon to bring an
Yeah.
audience back. Someone's doing this 10 years or more, you should have multiple shows from which to choose at any given point in your set. Where do I need to go to get these people back?
Yeah. Yeah.
And you have to balance that against, I have to be true to myself. I have to do my show. I have to do a show that reflects who I am. So I just can't go to the toilet and hope that's what they want to hear. But you need to have different energy levels, a high energy show, a lower volume show, a show that children can come to, a show that's for old people, a show that's for nothing. I mean, you need to have 4 or 5 shows in your back pocket you can pull out. And if one of those shows isn't going well, pull out another one. And I've
Yeah.
told audiences, folks, this isn't going well, so we're going to try something now a little bit different. And I'll just switch topics and switch approaches. I've done shows. It's in a nightclub, of course, not a corporate event, but I had a show that wasn't going great. And I said, folks, I got to stop right now. We're about 8 minutes into my show, and I just need to know why you all hate me. Beginning, sir, with you. Could you stand up for me, please? And this guy stands up, sir. Why do you hate me? Well, he starts laughing. They start laughing, and now they're back. And so, you
Nice.
know,
Nice.
you have to have some strategies that these emergency ripcords you can pull when you have to bail out of that plane. Doesn't mean you're going to crash. It means you're going to find a way to parachute to ground and be okay.
I produced a show about 7 years ago, Mark, and I invited a headlining comedian to perform at my show. And he thought I was a white guy until he met me. So he gets off the plane. He gets off the plane and he goes, "You're black." So anyway, so yes, I've been black my entire life. But anyway, so we get to the venue.
Well, not yet. Anyway, more life
so we
to
get
go.
to the venue, and the whole audience is black. He was expecting a white audience, and he came with the material that he had prepared, and he's bombing. It's like 2 minutes in, 2 or 3 minutes in, and he's bombing, and I'm going, oh my gosh, how's he going to dig out of this? And Mark, I tell you right now, he switched gears. He went into another gear, and he killed for the next 45 minutes. I mean, he destroyed. And I asked him after. I said, "My gosh, man, I'm so glad you were able to figure that out." I said, "How the heck did you do?" They said, "Man, I've been doing this for 17 years, and I've seen just about everything."
Yeah.
So it was a great learning experience for me to witness that, because I was only about 3 years in. I've only been doing this for 10 years, by the way, Mark. So I'm still kind of learning stuff, but I was really a pup then, and I just couldn't believe what I had witnessed. To your point about having strategies to deal with situations and to get out of it.
When we're off interview, I'd love to know who that comic was.
Oh, absolutely. We'll tell you. Absolutely. He's really good too. But yeah, I was just blown away.
You talk about audiences of different compositions. I worked Atlantis in the Bahamas. I was there 2 weeks every summer for 17 years. And they made an effort towards getting more Bahamians to come in to see the comedy show, which was really for people staying at the resort. I mean, it's a $20 ticket, which it's just going to be for the resort people. But they wanted more Bahamians to come see the show, which I thought was a great idea. I was never sure, well, are they going to get me? These are people from a completely different culture, island culture, and different ethnic backgrounds. Well, the people that came to the show came as couples. The Bahamians that came to that show always came as married couples or long-term relationship couples. And I do a lot of relationship humor. And when I was looking in the back of the room saying, well, these are men and women sitting together as couples, they're going to get my family stuff, my relationship stuff. I mean, that's where I'm going to go with them. You put me in front of an audience of, say, I don't know, people, between 19 and 22 years old, and you can't see them over the giant pina coladas in front of them. I don't care how much pigment they have in their skin or don't have. They're not going to get me because that's not who I am anymore.
Right,
So
right.
My fears about that audience were completely unfounded, because in a familial, spiritual, and life stage sense, they were exactly my audience, whether I knew it or not, before I walked into the room.
Wow. Amazing. Well, with that being said, Mark, and you've been doing comedy for a while, so that you have learned about this craft that you picked up that might have been a game changer for you, or where you really turned a corner. But what is it about this business of comedy that you've learned that has made you a better comedian?
I learned not to try to be everything to everybody. I'm a certain type of act. It's perfect for the right people.
Okay.
There's people it's never going to be right for, and you can't change them, and I sure can't change myself. And I've been very lucky, is not the right word for it. It's been fortunate for me that I always knew who I wanted to be on stage and who I didn't want to be on stage.
Yeah.
I always knew always been financially motivated in comedy. I knew how much money I needed to make to live the way I want to live and feed my family. I knew I'd never wanted to live in Los Angeles or New York, so I wasn't probably going to be a sitcom TV guy. Doesn't break my heart. That was never one of my career goals anyway. I've
Yeah.
had some TV things come across, but my focus has always been live entertainment. And it's just a realization of, if you are who you want to be on stage and you polish that stone up with 1,000 shows done right, that works. You don't have to try to be someone you're not. You don't have to try to fake it. You be who you are, but be the best version of that and the funniest version of that. And you'll be thrilled to go to work every night. And the few regrets I have, and they're very few. I've met nothing but great people doing this for a living. I can count on one hand the people I don't want to ever see again. And I'm 40 years doing this.
Yeah.
So been
Yeah.
very lucky
Yeah.
with that. I've run into some great agents and some lousy ones, some great rooms and some bad ones. But you ask what really turned the corner of when the light went on. It was just a sense of, when you're on stage, being true to yourself and you've prepared this show correctly for the people out there. There's no place else you'd rather be. It's where I'd rather be than any place else in the world, when it's going the way it's supposed to go. And there's most people in life don't get that feeling. Most people in life aren't lucky enough to have that. And as comedians, in a perfect world, we get it every time we go up there. In the most imperfect of worlds, we get it more than a few times every week. And that's a rare thing.
Well, you mentioned that there are certain you have a style that's not for necessarily everybody, and it's not your job or goal to change them, and they're not going to change you. So with that, I'm wondering, have you ever had an offer or been approached to perform where you were like, I don't know if my style is going to work here, and you didn't take it?
Yes, but never as a nightclub comic. When I was a young
Okay.
nightclub comic, you give me a microphone, I'm there. If your check clears, I'm your guy. When I
Yeah.
started, I mean, you know that feeling. I mean,
Yeah.
I learned that not every gig is the right one for me. When I started doing corporate humor speaking, a lot of these guys who do humor also, they say they're humorists. Most of them are not. They know
Okay.
that people like to book funny, so they would put that in their resume, but they were trainers, motivators, educators. And I learned to tell my clients in that business, look, who I am is important. Who I'm not is just as important for your corporate event. I don't
Hmm.
motivate. I don't educate. I don't train.
Hmm.
My mission statement is, I talk, you laugh. That's what I do. It'll be
Yes.
clean, it'll be appropriate. I'll write it for your client and your audience, but I'm not a motivational speaker. And I learned to refer those out to people who that's what they do and they know how to do it. That's not me. So I did learn to say no to the gigs that weren't right for me and that I wasn't right for, because why do a one-off and make a client unhappy when you can have another chance at them in a better setting and make everybody happy?
Exactly. Exactly. And comedy is one of those businesses where I firmly believe that comedy is probably the most challenging art form that exists. Most rewarding at the same time, but the challenge, I think, is just the biggest in the form of the arts. But with that being said, it can be pretty brazen, and you got to really love it from deep down to just keep staying with it. Have you ever had a crossroads experience, Mark, where you weren't sure that you wanted to
No,
continue with comedy?
no. Maurice,
Okay.
I can tell you, in 40 years of doing this for a living, that's how I feed my family, is telling jokes to people. I never
Okay.
had a time on the road when, what am I doing out here halfway between Wichita and Leavenworth? And it's 2 in the
Yeah.
morning. I never had that feeling. I knew that
Okay.
this wasn't the best week I've ever had, but at no point did I ever say, you need to find something else to do.
Okay. Awesome. I love asking that question to comics because the answers kind of vary. Some guys have had those moments like, oh man, I don't know, and that's that moment where you find out whether or not you really are built for this, whether or not you really do love this, and also to your point about whether or not, hey, look, my mind's made up. Sometimes those divots in the road can occur because it gets difficult. It's like, oh my gosh, what do I need to do to break through? But I love your answer. I mean, you've had your mind made up. I'm doing this no matter what, and I'm kind of like that myself, Mark. I remember once I bombed in front of my wife and kids, and I said, okay, what went wrong? I said that was self-induced. I said the only thing that I felt bad about was they had to experience that with me. That was the only thing that bothered me, but it didn't bother me. It's like, oh, wow, that's a bad night at the office, so I'll be back. That never affected me. But those moments when your family, when they have to get out with you, you kind of feel bad about that. But
I'll tell you something
outside
about
of now,
that's a great point. When I did a lot of nightclub shows, especially here in my hometown, I always told the club owner, don't seat my family where I can see them. They can come to the show. I don't want to see them. I've got a show to do. My mother died before I started working cruise ships, but she saw me work pretty good nightclubs. My father lived until he was in his 90s, and he saw me do every kind of show that I do. He saw me bomb terribly in front of toilet rooms. He saw me headline the nicest cruise ships in the world. He saw me knock down a Saturday night show in front of a comedy club, do a standing ovation. He got to see, but because both my mom and dad had gone to my early shows that weren't very good ones, they knew how far that journey was. They knew how long that trip was from open mic night or 15 people in the audience on a Wednesday night to 700 people in a cruise ship theater. And because they saw the front part of that journey, they knew how far it was. And the same has been true for my son. My son is in his 20s now, but he went with me as a child on some gigs and some nightclubs and a cruise ship. So my wife and child both know my business intimately. They know what I do, how I do it, what it takes to do it. And I've always been glad of that.
Amen to that. I love it. You mentioned open mics, Mark. At what point? And I would assume that at this stage of your career, you probably don't do open mics anymore. I don't know, but I know that open mics are valuable for building material, staying in rhythm, and all those type of things. Something before COVID-19 hit, I did quite a bit. I was doing a lot of those just to stay with it or what have you. But at what point, if you did you stop doing open mics?
I haven't done open mics in over 30 years. And that's
my gosh.
That's not out of any sense and I'm above it or beyond it. I just know from my audience is not going to be in that crowd. The people on whom I want to test my material are not going to be in an open mic comedy club audience. Or just not, that's not who's out there. So it does me no good to test material there, because if it goes over well, that's no barometer of how it's going to go when it counts. And if it doesn't go over, what have I done? I've taken 10 minutes of stage time from somebody doing this 90 days that really does need the stage time to try to become a comedian. I have my show is an hour long. Most of the shows I do are 45 minutes to an hour long. There's plenty of time in there where I can work a new bit in to find out if it has legs or not. So it's just really a matter of am I serving myself and my audience well by doing an open mic? And the answer to that just is no. And I never had to do a lot of them, because when I started doing comedy, they needed comedians, good, bad, and different. They needed comics to fill stages. So I never had to do a lot of auditions or open mic nights to become a comedian. That tells you how old I am too.
Well, I remember George Carlin, a story about George Carlin, when you talk about building material and doing open mic, so forth and so on. George Carlin was never a believer in that kind of preparation for his specials. George Carlin would actually write out his entire routine to his own satisfaction. And when he was ready to go with what he thought was gold, he presented gold. So I thought it was an interesting process in which George Carlin operated. I mean, some of the best comics in the world, are like, Richard Pryor all time, Steve Martin all time, guys like that. They're always doing. Even Jerry Seinfeld, he still believes in open mic, believe it or not, up there in New York. He still likes to do that. But I've always found it interesting, a guy that's so confident in what he can produce and get out there and get it done. I got a huge amount of respect for. But your method is pretty good. I mean, Mark, you've been doing it tried and true to the extent where you've kind of got it down to a science.
Well, it's unique to everyone. Comedy is a fingerprint. It's unique to everyone. Gold to George Carlin is 10 in someone else's hands. So he
Yeah.
certainly, people like that know I'm writing this for how I deliver. No one else can deliver this material like this. Let him steal it. Who's going to do any better with it? Nobody. And when it just
true.
depends on the type of material you write. To write a joke, to write a set up punchline boom joke and try 5 in a row in an open mic, fine. There's no shame in that, and that's probably a fair test of the joke. But to write routines, develop material that has beginning, a middle, and an end, open mic audiences tend not to be great for that. The last routine I wrote was about 3 days ago. I wrote a bit on the Galilean moons of Jupiter, which were the moons of Jupiter that Galileo could see with the primitive telescopes of the 1500s. Yeah, I know, it's pretty esoteric. It doesn't sound very funny, and it's way out there. You don't test a routine that has Callista, Io, Europa, and Ganymede in it on an open mic audience.
No, you wouldn't want to do that.
Yeah,
You would
no.
lose them immediately.
Yeah. So, but it depends on what type of material you're writing and for whom you're writing.
Yeah.
And I tried it for the first time in one of the rare nightclub gigs that I do. That's where I tried it out. The bit worked. I couldn't tell you how. I tried it a second time and it worked, and it's going to have some legs. But my next step with that routine is to write it out by hand, word for word, on a legal sheet of paper. Because when I write it down, it sticks. The funny parts stick out. The unfunny parts, I know where those are too. And that's how I cement material in my mind. I have to write it out. I still write out set lists. Before every show, I prepare a set list written out. Here's where I'm going to try to go. I can vary off that. I can change it. I can switch gears. But my outline, my game plan, my quarterback in my head knows how he wants to move the ball down the field. And I can only do that by writing this stuff out.
Now, how do you deal with butterflies, Mark? Nervousness and just the nerves and everything. I mean, do you have a ritual or a process that you go through to stay calm, or is this just never an issue for you? You're usually ready to go.
It's not an issue for me. I don't get nervous. I don't get butterflies. I have shows. I don't ever hope a show goes well. I tell myself, I know this show is going to go well. As comics, we are masters of self-delusion. And so I don't go on, and you can tell when a comic is on stage, he's hoping this is going to go well.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
I don't have that in my head. This is going to go well because this is what I do. This is a home game for me. And I might win it 10-7, and I might win it 65-0, but I'm going to win this game.
Now that's something that I learned a few years ago about being confident, and this is a home game, and this is my field, and I'm going to kill. You may not necessarily, but as long as your mentality is high, it eliminates nerves. I saw Bob Newhart. Bob Newhart in an interview, he was talking about nerves. Now Bob Newhart's got to be between 85 and 90 years old. I'm guessing he's up there. Might be over 90. I don't know. But Bob Newhart, he said, you know what? If I had to do a show tomorrow night, I'd be nervous. Bob Newhart, I'm always nervous before a show. So I guess it's interesting when you look at, and that's why I love asking that question, because I get different responses. But Bob Newhart, you go, oh my gosh, I don't believe it. But sometimes that's what motivates a guy too. It's like they just perform better with that adrenaline.
Some comics are funnier when there's an edginess that uncertainty gives them. And sometimes it's a little forced. Sometimes it's absolutely genuine. You can usually tell. Because I don't do funny faces or funny voices, I'm not a physical performer. What makes my act is how I put words together,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
and nuance, and so that comes from confidence. That has to sound like every syllable in my act is in there for a reason. There's no wasted words or spaces in my show.
Yeah, I've seen you, and you're quite good. And I was thinking, my gosh, I've seen this guy somewhere before, and I mean, you were just very, very professional and smooth and natural, and I thought it was pretty awesome. Now, Mark, this has been a great conversation. I tell you right now, I've loved every moment of it. And I want to ask my guest before we get out of here, and that's this. What kind of advice can you leave with younger comedians that are out there that are toying with the idea of doing this full time? I'm going to be a comedian. I'm going to go for it. What kind of advice can you leave with them?
4 minutes on TikTok is not an act.
Right.
There's a difference between having an act and having a show.
Yeah.
I would say find out who you need to be on stage and build a show around that. A beginning, a middle, and an end. That
Okay.
show might consist of 10 6-minute bits. It might be one long 60-minute bit. But learn the difference between having jokes and having a show.
Oh man, great advice. Great advice. I've also heard advice given where comics should look, build 5 minutes that kill. Just keep work. I mean, if it's not killing, you still got, and then work on the next 5 and the next 5, so forth, and just build until you get a real routine, which would be anywhere from 45 to 60 minutes, I would guess. So, but no, I love what you're saying. A lot of comics will just dive out there. I had a friend that went out to Vegas. He took a 45-minute gig out of it. Wasn't near ready. Wasn't near, I don't even think he had 10 minutes, but they paid well. He took the gig. He went out there and bobbed. I mean, dude, it was, and his name became mud in the industry. So you gotta know what you're doing before you even get up there.
Preparation.
You got to prepare. Mark, is there any way that fans can follow you on social media or contact you for booking?
As you might have guessed, social media is not a place where I spend a great deal of my time.
Okay.
I am on, because I'm 1,000 years old, I'm on Facebook, of course, because I'm an old man.
Yeah.
So you can find comedian Mark Klein on Facebook.
Yes.
My website is corpjester.com, corpjester.com. And my email address is corpjester@hotmail.com. I'm easy to find. You drill down one layer of the onion, you can not come up. I'm on YouTube, comedian Mark Klein. My clips will pop up there. I'm easy to find and glad to hear from people, so no worries.
Awesome stuff. Ladies and gentlemen, we've been talking with the very funny and talented Mark Klein. You can see him on a Dry Bar comedy special. Just go to Dry Bar. You can find Mark Klein. And if you have enjoyed this conversation, like it and share it and subscribe to the Maurice Brown Comedy channel on YouTube. And if you're just coming in late and you've missed just about all of this, you can watch the entire replay tonight on the Creative Motion Network on Roku TV. As a matter of fact, that's going to be posted at about 3 p.m. So if you missed it, Roku TV, the Creative Motion Network. And we, once again, have been talking with the very funny and talented Mark Klein on the Maurice Brown Show. Mark, once again, this has been an awesome time hanging out with you. And Mark, I want you to stick around because I want to tell you who that comic was that turned his ball game around and destroyed. So continue to hang out. Once again, Mark Klein on the Maurice Brown Show. May the peace of the Lord be with you and your family, Mark. God bless you, brother.
Thank you, Mr. Brown.